Stewart Daniel Begg, August 13th, 1947. Born in Cornwall, Ontario. Everybody called me Stu, and still to this day they call me Stu. Well, that's pretty much a loaded question. The reason why I say that is I started in Ontario, where I started playing lacrosse in Cornwall, and I started refereeing there, and then eventually I went to Bancroft, Ontario. And from Ontario, I then moved to Alberta in 1981. So from 1981 onward, I was involved with the Alberta Lacrosse Association, but I've also been involved with the Canadian Lacrosse Association for 15 years. I started refereeing in 1962, and from there I ended up being referee in chief for the area of Cornwall. And then eventually, whenever they had the EOLA, Eastern Ontario Lacrosse Association, which was sort of severed from the Oshawa, Toronto area, I was president of the Referees Association back then in the Cornwall area, Cornwall, Ottawa, and Morrisburg, and so on. So from there, I refereed, and I left in 1972 and went to Bancroft. And in Bancroft, there was no lacrosse at all. So based on, I met a guy who had played lacrosse before, and as well as I did, and we started lacrosse in Bancroft, Ontario, and of course, somebody's got to be the president, so I was the president of the Bancroft Lacrosse Association. I left Ontario and went to Alberta, and lived in Cardston, Alberta, down in the southern part of Alberta. And there was virtually no lacrosse at all down there, but I did participate a little bit with lacrosse in Lethbridge. And eventually in 1970 or 1986, I moved up to Fort Saskatchewan, where I presently live today. So whenever I moved up, a group of us who were refereeing in the particular lacrosse league all met out at the Bill Hunter rink, and Mark Asbell said, let's start a referees association. And so we started the Lacrosse Association. Mark was the referee in chief, or the president of the Referees Association, for a couple of years. And then from there he says, it's time for me to step down. We want you to step up and take over. He said, there's really nothing to do. It's just a name and a position. Well, I quickly learned that that wasn't the case. There was an awful lot of work and an awful lot of development and so on. With being president of the Referees Association, I got involved with the Canadian Lacrosse Association. I spent 15 years with the Canadian Lacrosse, and I was referee in chief for Canada for 8 years, and in charge of the high performance program for another 7 years. So I've been all over Canada. Actually, because of the lacrosse program, I've been all over the world. I have to say I'm the most fortunate person whenever it comes to the sport of lacrosse, to be able to travel and meet people, and we're just getting ready now to go down to Alabama, and we're going to be down there, and I know people down there who are involved with lacrosse. In 1959, whenever they decided to start lacrosse, it was somewhat coming on to the spring, so it was kind of put together pretty quick. So the issue is, okay, we're going to play lacrosse. Well, we know we're going to get lacrosse sticks across on Cornwall Island. And so my first lacrosse stick, I purchased a stick for 75 cents, and to have it strung was another 50 cents, so $1.25. And back then, that was reasonable. That was a really good price, but affordable, that we could flood the market with real lacrosse sticks. So we came in, we had to have a place to play, and we played at the 7th Street Park in Cornwall. And it was an old hockey box, and we had to repair the box and fix the wire on the end and so on. And the lines of the crease and the face-off circles were all made of lime. So you had to be careful if you had a cut on your knees and so on, which is very common, and you get lime in it, you're going to have to flood it with water. And so that was the playing area, and we played 4 15-minute periods back then, as compared to 3 20s as we play now. So the game started to evolve, and of course now we have the issue of equipment. So the most important person out there who's going to get whacked is the goalie. So what does he wear? So what they did was they allowed him to wear steel-toe boots, construction boots, and they went and they got shin pads from baseball, and that's what the goaltender wore. But the trouble with the baseball shin pads was any hard shots were busting up the shin pads. So it was, he tried to use his lacrosse stick as much as possible. The belly pad was a belly pad that an umpire would wear in a ball game, And then he wore for gloves, he wore hockey gloves. And for the trapper was a hockey trapper is what he used. I was the lead person for the World Championships in Langley. And I had a lot of time to mill with the people part of the World Lacrosse, who used to be the Federation of International Lacrosse. And based on my experience with them and learning more and more, it's really difficult to say. I know lacrosse has had a very difficult time getting sponsorship and that exposure and so on. But if in fact lacrosse has gone through the steps with the World Lacrosse Association organizations and so on to get to that level, that they're expecting that lacrosse will be in the 2028 Olympics. Having said that, they're hoping for. Now, having said that, if in fact it does, then the money is going to flow for the development and the exposure, more of the exposure and the development in that order, to get lacrosse going. Lacrosse is, in my opinion, is a fantastic sport. The conditioning and the skill, the eye contact, the roughness and toughness and so on, it's a fantastic game. It's just that we can't seem to get that exposure to a lot of the different communities across Canada or the world. Now, in the world, lacrosse is being developed primarily in the field program, and in the women's also, the women's program, that eventually I can see it going back into the Olympics. If it goes back into the Olympics, the doors are going to open, and I can see lacrosse expanding even more than what it has to date. So I'm really hoping that everybody does their homework and crosses their fingers to get that back into the Olympics. Yeah, I've officiated at every level. I haven't done I shouldn't say I haven't done the Mann Cup, because I did in 1969, I believe it was. But yeah, I've been the convener at, actually this morning I did my edition, and I've been convener for 13 national championships across Canada. The camaraderie of meeting people and going back, and I'll reflect I was in Ganawagi here last year for the President's Cup, and to go back there and see a lot of the people I've met from years past, and even some of the players that come up and give you a hug and ask you how you're doing, how's life, and how's the family, and so on. That's one of the biggest enjoyments that I have, is meeting up with people to just enjoy that camaraderie that we have in the lacrosse family. Yeah, my assessing started back in Cornwall whenever I was there, and from there we moved up to Bancroft, and then once I'm out west in Alberta, I've done a tremendous number of assessments on officials. And the enjoyment is, and what we started in Alberta was a third official on the floor, where we have 2 junior referees and you go out on the floor as a senior referee. And at first I was a little bit opposed to that. First of all, thinking about the cost of the teams and so on. But at the end, that was a great payoff. And today we still have referees that I did assessing on and coached them through that are still officiating and have gone to national championships. What happened with the officiating committee, I was asked if I would be the head official for Canada, and this was sort of developing the NOCP, the National Officials Certification Program. So I managed to get a group of people from the different provinces, one person from each of the provinces, to come in, and we formed this committee, and we had to review what in fact was there and what was not there. Well, what was not there was a lot, and what was there was pretty dated. So what we did was we developed a national officials program, so that we developed the program that would be sent to all the provinces, and they would be able to take that training program through projectors and so on onto a screen, and everybody was to have the same program whenever it came to training officials. And then from there, we would expect that the head officials in those provinces would designate someone who would be doing there to do assessments to make sure that there's consistency. So it took about 3 years to get that really rolling well, and then we started to fine tune it, and things turned out really, really well. The unfortunate thing is that with the officiating program, we have the rule book, but the rule book, some provinces modify it or add rules to it that changes the concept of what the rule interpretation is. So it was a bit of a clash between us developing the program and some of the provinces. But overall, whenever it came to a national championship, we followed the rules of play of the Canadian Lacrosse Association. So we did that, and we did recognition programs for our officials across Canada, and we really did a tremendous amount of work. We would have our guys, or our team, and we had some ladies also, who would show up on a Friday night, and we would work Saturday morning till about 6 o'clock in the morning, and come 10:30, 11 o'clock, we were back at it, and then come Sunday, we would fly home. So they knew it wasn't a vacation. They all knew that we were there to develop the program, and we did a tremendous job. So it took a lot of work. We had John Hurd, who is the god of the rule book. He knows the rules inside out. He can tell you the page numbers. He can tell you, well, if we change this rule, it'll affect another rule, and so on. So I had really, really good people involved whenever it came to developing the rules of play. So I was quite lucky, or I should say, we, the Canadian Lacrosse Association and the provinces, were quite lucky to have such valuable people that I did have on the committee. And people who were there thinking that it was a bit of a holiday. It wasn't hard to weed them out, and they realized that we were there to work, and we were, there's expenses. And expenses, the money from expenses comes from kids registering. So I got my money's worth out of these people, and at the end of the day, and then from there I did that for 8 years, and then we turned it over to to Brent McCauley. And Brent McCauley was on the team at that time too. And Brent knew how we worked and what we could do to develop, and he also fine-tuned things and so on. So it just continued on, and it's still a very strong program, very strong program. In 1969 with the Canada Games, and later on whenever we had the World Lacrosse Championships in Halifax and so on, the issue of getting referees to go to national championships or to world competition, because the Federation of International Lacrosse was developing all over the world. So in order to get people to go, well, first of all, if they're employed, who's going to, can they get time off of work? And that was a big concern. And if they could get time off of work, then they're going to have to spend, a few $1,000s to go and referee a sport that they love. But the thing is that it's going to be a few $1,000s out of their pocket. So at that time, I think we were paying $3 along with the players, $2 or $3 for registration. And I thought, something, the only way we can get officials to go to national championships and world competitions and develop our program across Canada would be to have that experience of going to these events. So what we decided was that we're going to raise it to $10. And we raised it from $3 or $2 to $10, which then we started putting the money into a pool. So whenever it came to national championships, we had X number of dollars that we could, I'll say $500, that we could give to you to fly from, I'll say BC to Ontario or Nova Scotia to Ontario, whatever the case is, and help cover those costs. So as time went on and costs started going up and so on, what we decided was we're going to change this again. We're going to change this to $25. So we changed it to $25. Now we have a nice pool. Whenever it goes to national championships, whether it be the men's field, the women's field, or the box program, we have enough funds that are available that we can use those funds to help support the referees that are going to these competitions. And it takes that pressure off of guys and gals that they're able to attend. We have a good pool of people now who are always willing to attend. So that was one of the really good accomplishments that we put together.